You hear about economies booming all the time, right? But what does that actually mean for the people on the ground? Well, today we're going to try and answer that by diving into the fascinating and pretty complex story of India's economy. Let's get right into it. So, here's the big puzzle at the heart of India's recent economic story, and it's one that affects hundreds of millions of people. How on earth can a country's total wealth just soar while so many of its workers feel like they're getting left in the dust? That's the paradox we're going to unpack today. Okay, so first things first, let's follow the money. This chart here shows where India's economic value comes from. It's measured using something called gross value added, but you can just think of it as the value of all the stuff and services being produced. And it's super clear what the main engine is, right? The modern services sector. It's generating way over half of the country's entire economic value. But then you ask a different question. Okay, so where are the jobs? And whoa, the whole picture just flips on its head. Look at that. The biggest slice of the workforce, by a long shot, we're talking over 40%, is still in traditional farming. So you've got the economic value over in one corner and most of the people stuck in another. To figure out why this huge disconnect is happening, we've got to go back to basics. It turns out that pretty much every economy, whether it's super simple or incredibly complex, is built on three basic pillars or sectors. And if we can get a handle on these, we'll have the key to unlocking that big puzzle we saw in India. First up, you've got the primary sector. The easiest way to think about this is that it's the foundation. It's anything that we pull directly from the earth. So we're talking about farming, fishing, mining, you name it. This is the starting point for almost everything we make and use. Okay, so once you have those raw materials, what's next? Well, you've got to make stuff with them, and that's where the secondary sector comes in. This is the industrial and manufacturing heart of an economy. It's all about turning that raw cotton into a t-shirt or that iron ore into a car. And finally, we have the tertiary sector. Now, this one's a little different because it's not about making physical things. It's all about providing services. So think transport, banking, software, teachers, doctors. It's really the glue that holds the other two sectors together and helps them function. And here's a super simple example of how they all rely on each other. So a farmer grows sugarcane. That's the primary sector. A factory then takes that cane and turns it into sugar. That's the secondary sector. And then a truck driver delivers that sugar to all the stores. That's the tertiary sector. See, they're all connected. You can't really have one without the others. All right, so we've got the different parts of the economic machine. But how do we measure the size of the whole thing? Well, that's where a very, very famous three-letter acronym comes into play: GDP. GDP stands for Gross Domestic Product. In simple terms, it's the total value of all the final goods and services made in a country over 1 year. It's that big headline number you always hear about. And I really want you to pay attention to that word final, because trust me, it is absolutely crucial. And here's why that word matters so much. To get an accurate picture, economists have one golden rule. You cannot count the same thing twice. You can't count an item's value every single time it changes hands on its way to becoming a finished product. That would just inflate the numbers. Let's make this really simple. Think about a packet of biscuits, okay? So a farmer sells some wheat for 20 rupees. Then a mill buys that wheat, grinds it into flour, and sells the flour for 25 rupees. Finally, a bakery uses that flour to bake biscuits and sells the final packet to you, the customer, for 80 rupees. The wheat and the flour are what we call intermediate goods. So when it's time to calculate the GDP, the only number that gets counted is that final 80 rupees you paid for the biscuits. And why is that? Well, it's because the value of the wheat and the flour is already baked into that final price. It's a clever little trick to make sure the accounting is honest. Okay, so now we've got our tools. We understand sectors and we know what GDP is. We're ready. Let's get back to our central puzzle and look at what the heck happened in India's economy over the last 40 years. Whoa. Okay, just look at this chart. It shows an absolutely massive transformation. If you go back to the late 70s, it was the primary sector, farming and resources, that was the biggest part of the economy. Now, fast forward 40 years, and the service sector has just exploded. It completely dwarfs everything else. The entire economic engine got a complete overhaul. But, and this is the absolute core of the problem, while the production changed in a huge way, the workforce didn't really follow. That primary sector, the one that now produces the least economic value, is still the country's #1 employer. Not nearly enough jobs were created in manufacturing and services to pull people out of agriculture. A big part of the reason is that a lot of that new service sector growth was in really high-skill areas, like software, which don't actually hire huge numbers of people.
And honestly, this one statistic says it all. You get a 14-fold increase in what the service sector is producing, but only a 5-fold increase in the number of people it employs. That huge gap right there, that is the story of India's so-called jobless growth.
Now, this isn't just about numbers on a chart. This has a massive, real-world impact on people's lives. It creates a weird situation that you could call hidden unemployment.
The official term for this is disguised unemployment. And it's pretty much what it sounds like. It's when people look like they're working, they're definitely not sitting around doing nothing, but there just isn't enough actual productive work for them to do. It's like having 5 people to do a 2-person job.
Let's make this real. The source material tells the story of Lakshmi's family. There are 5 of them, and they all work on their small family farm. The thing is, the work on that farm could easily be done by just 2 or 3 people. So nobody is idle, but nobody is really fully employed either. They're all underemployed. If, say, 2 of them left to go work in a factory, the amount of food the farm produces wouldn't drop at all. And that's the reality for millions of people.
So, how do you fix a problem this big? Well, there's no single magic bullet. It's really about attacking the problem from a bunch of different angles at once. Things like investing in rural areas to make farms more productive, making it easier for farmers to get loans, encouraging new industries to pop up in smaller towns, and using government programs to directly create work where it's needed most.
And there's one last really important piece to this whole puzzle. It's not just about the number of jobs. It's about the quality of those jobs. And in India, it's really a tale of 2 completely different worlds of work. Let's just compare 2 people, Kanta and Kamal. Kanta works in what's called the organized sector. She has a real contract, gets a regular salary, fixed hours, paid leave, and benefits. Her job is secure. Her neighbor, Kamal, works in the unorganized sector. He's a day laborer. He has 0 job security, no benefits, no paid holidays. If he doesn't work, he doesn't get paid. And what's really disturbing is that the huge majority of workers in India are in the same boat as Kamal, not Kanta. So we kind of end up back where we started, but now that central paradox is a lot clearer. India's story is powerful proof that a big rising GDP number just doesn't tell you the whole story of a country's health. The real tough challenge is figuring out how to turn that headline growth into real security and real opportunity for everyone. And it forces us to ask a really important question. What good is a booming economy if most people don't get to feel the boom?